Alrighty, hope everyone is having a great day. Today I am here with several graduate students from UT Austin. These folks are organizing for a couple of things on the UT Austin campus here, including a higher wages for graduate students, as well as, I believe, a freeze on graduate student rent for on-campus housing. I'm joined with 4 of the organizers today. Thank you all so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. I want to start off, for me, this was kind of an interesting thing to start seeing. I first saw it in California, although you all may have been doing it first. I'm not sure. You can clue me in a second. But the idea of graduate students organizing for more wages to a lot of folks is confusing. Until a little over a year ago, I didn't even necessarily know how this whole system worked, right? With, in my head, as someone who isn't in academia, I didn't realize that graduate students in many cases are actually being paid through whether it be stipends or grants or something like this. Do you want to just explain how that system works? Because I think a lot of folks think of this and they think, wait, these people should be paying to go to graduate school, not the other way around. Joseph, I guess, do you want to explain kind of how this system works and why students are getting paid in the first place?
Yeah, sure. So normally when you're talking about graduate student workers, that there's, at least at UT and at most universities, sometimes there's a slight change in the exact names they use, but there are generally kind of 4 options that people are thinking of. So at UT, there are graduate assistants that are doing various types of administrative work in various centers, departments, institutes, offices. And so quite literally, aside from even teaching classes or conducting research, are supporting the daily functioning of the university. They're probably working on projects that bring in money sometimes to the university through grants and other things like that. Graduate research assistants, they could be doing the same thing, working on research projects across the university or working directly with faculty and occasionally on research of their own. So in that case, they're being paid to do research for the university in various capacities. Teaching assistants, so it's sort of in the name, they're usually assisting a professor. But at least at UT, and I think in a lot of other cases, it's sort of a misnomer as to how much they're contributing, because usually a teaching assistant, in addition to having to attend all of the classes and keep up with the curriculum, occasionally step in and teach their own class. They're usually going to be sort of the face of the class or like a liaison to the student, so to speak. And so they deal with a lot of email communications. There are students bringing up academic and personal issues with them. They, give advice, write recommendations, and they do a lot of grading. So my roommate, for example, at 3 points this semester graded 80 papers, which can be rewritten if students want a better grade. So they probably graded somewhere around 300 papers this semester. And that doesn't even include weekly grading on other types of assignments. And then the last one at UT is assistant instructor, which is sort of like one notch above the TA in the sense that they teach their own class entirely. And it depends on a department basis. But my partner, for example, receives the curriculum for a new class like a week or 2 before the semester starts, and then is learning the curriculum as he goes, and is teaching a new class along the way, and then does all facets of it, preparing for the class, teaching the class, grading, student issues, all of that.
Right. So to summarize some of that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seems like, they're acting in a lot of roles that are either assisting a professor with a class, in a lot of cases, almost full on teaching classes, and or doing research that is essentially like helping to bring in grant funding to the university and to places on the university campus. Is that generally a correct statement there, I guess, to summarize some of that?
Yeah, I would say so. And usually that also leads people are publishing or hosting or attending conferences as well. And particularly with the research publications and things like that, those are things that boost the university in rankings. So in another sense, sort of indirectly bringing in more money or more students, more faculty.
Right. So I just wanted to clarify that right on the outset, because a lot of people right away look at this sort of thing and they're like, oh, these whiny students need to like get their act together. It's like, no, these students are actually like doing a ton of work behind the scenes. Again, I mentioned like a year and a half ago, I kind of learned more about this. My partner is a graduate student going through a lot of this sort of stuff. He's in more of a science field, and it's wild to see the amount of work that goes into a lot of it. TAing classes takes a lot of time, like you'd mentioned there. I mean, I know he spent days at a time when he was doing the TAing, meeting individually with students, doing all this sort of stuff. So there's a lot of work that people don't realize is going on with all of the sort of work that you all do. I went through a lot of the open letter that you all put together, outlining, some of your demands and the rationale behind why you all are helping to push for higher wages here. I guess, Lauren, do you want to kind of go through and explain a little bit of what's in that open letter and kind of the rationale behind what you all are doing? I think you all did a really good job putting that together.
Yeah, and just to ask a clarifying question, do you mean the letter to the Provost Wood or the attached open letter with the survey synthesis?
More so the attached open letter that kind of like goes through, the increases in, costs of everything and that sort of thing, the cost of living in Austin and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so actually, I'm going to turn this one back to Joe, who is sort of the main author and initiator of the open letter, but maybe one of the three of us can sort of chime in afterwards.
For sure.
Okay, yeah. So with that open letter, that technically, like in a grander sense, kind of began with Depeche. So Depeche, over the spring summer 2022, issued a survey about cost of living among physics students, which social connections between international students in physics and then Spanish Portuguese studies made its way to colleagues of mine, and then to me in Latin American studies. And we had in Latin American studies a cabildo, which is like a town hall, which is sort of customary in our department, where basically if our student association requests it, demands it, they have to kind of hear our grievances. And so we did that, and it was largely over financial issues and over funding. And their response is generally that, oh, it's the people above us who give us that money. And so I decided to do the survey as well. And then I'm our graduate student assembly representative. And so I was basically hearing, oh, someone in social work, someone in engineering, someone in history. Everyone was kind of every week, someone from a different department was complaining about the same problems. And so I was like, well, if I just do a survey in my department and bring it to the institute, they're going to give us the same response again. So we need to make this a much bigger thing. And so I got all the emails I could find of GSA representatives and chairs and co-chairs of student associations and just blasted out an email. And then over the course of the semester, I've worked with student leaders in nearly 30 departments, or about 30 departments, I would say now, because we've gotten some since the grade-in. And so what's in the letter, you see the results, and we're waiting for more, so it'll be ongoing. I'll continuously add to that. But we have the response from 634 graduate students across 17 departments and 4 colleges at UT. And so in each department, they were allowed to make different changes. If there was department-specific questions they wanted to ask, or if they just thought of something that wasn't in the original template. But it's asking things about, what type of appointment do you have? How much money do you make? Rent, food, medical expenses, transportation, what percentage of your income is that? What other financial issues are you experiencing? And then that first part with the open letter is kind of giving the context for why we wanted to do these surveys, which, the university should be doing that. We shouldn't be doing this labor for them to figure out this information. But that was sort of the idea behind it. I don't know if you want me to talk about the contents, but that was why we did this survey effort.
For sure, yeah. I mean, even if someone wants to give like a brief summation of some of what you all found, and we'll include a link to this for anyone watching if you want to go and look at the actual letter itself. We'll include a link in the description down below the video. But if someone wants to give just a couple anecdotes of, kind of the range in pay that people are getting depending on the department, and also, some of the cost of living increases and that sort of thing, that'd be great.
I can speak a little bit about my department, and then maybe Depeche, since you ran the physics, you can do that as well if you feel like it. So in English, I was the one who facilitated my department survey, and there's one of the larger issues that Underpaid is interested in dealing with and trying to remedy across the university is differential pay across departments. So there are certain graduate workers and certain colleges who make not quite double, but quite a lot more than the sort of base pay across departments. So in English, we make the sort of university-wide minimum, which is just around 20,000. I wish it was 200. No, $20,000 a year. I think it's 19.5 to 21 is our range specifically. And so, the findings in my department is that that amount of wages is not enough to cover the yearly cost of living in Austin. The majority of students in my department are cost burdened for their rent. So the vast majority pay over 30% of their income in rent, and then just over 50 pay between 40+% of their income. So that would be considered severely cost burden. Many people have paid or have experienced recent rent hikes as the cost of living rises. So that's between $100 extra a month to many people reporting $300+ a month more than last year of their rent. So issues like this are compounded with the lack of summer funding that many students in my department experience. That was sort of, above the house or right below the housing problems. I would say summer funding was like a big issue across my department. So many of us don't have guaranteed summer funding, which means we get our last paycheck in June and then we don't get another one until October. If you already are struggling to make ends meet and pay your bills, you're not going to have a lot of savings and you're not going to have a lot of capacity, aside from getting another job off campus to pay your bills over the summer. So a lot of people take on debt, either credit debt or loans, to try and cover these expenses. And then, another issue that was raised, I would think, across this report, this open letter, is that international students are much more limited than domestic students in terms of the additional appointments they can take. And so the majority of students in my department have to take additional appointments at the university to make ends meet. I know I always have. And that's an option that's not available to international students because of their visa restrictions. So again, this is an equity issue across the university.
Mm-hmm. And just to give folks some context, I live in Austin as well. To imagine trying to live in Austin on $20,000 a year would be incredibly difficult. I mean, I'm like doing the math in my head, and rent alone is more than 50% of that. And that's I don't live in a fancy place. I live in a pretty compact apartment with my partner, in an area of town where it's not super walkable, and it's just oh, there's a lot of apartments right here. They're pretty cheap. To think that the university thinks that that is a reasonable wage for someone to actually live, and while also committing the amount of time required to do all of these things that you all are talking about when you're TAing and grading all of these papers and doing the research and all of this stuff. Anyone who would look at a budget and look at that math would see that that is clearly not feasible. Depesh, if you want to share kind of what the findings were in the physics department, that would be great. And then we can move on, and I'll get Brad into the conversation there as well.
Yeah, so the physics department, we did our survey, like Joe said, we did it in the spring and summer of 2022. So this was before even lease renewal started, when people started seeing rent hikes due to the cost, just due to the housing market in Austin. So the situation definitely gotten worse for people in my department, and we make around $32,000 a year now, which is a significant difference between the $20,000 that some students are getting. Mm-hmm. But the survey showed that even at $32,000, it's pretty hard to make ends meet, especially for some graduate students who are parents or their partners are dependent on them or things like that. There's scenarios where people need to be, that's just $32,000 does not go very far.
Right.
Our survey found for my department was that 40% of students had expenses that exceeded their income. And then also the average student, essentially, in terms of their cost, was about 92% of their expenses took up their income.
Right.
So essentially, there was very little amount of money to make any type of savings. If you didn't have any kind of emergency, you would rarely be okay. And then if there was an emergency happening, the possibility of actually getting that covered in any way is impossible. It's put it on a credit card or something like that. You have to go into debt to cover any type of emergency situation.
Yeah, if you're only able to save 8% of your income, I mean, you have a car issue, and it's now I can't, the public transportation, while, some of it seemingly gets better, or hopefully they're trying to make it better, it's not great. It's not Austin is not a transportation dreamland. Maybe if Yeah. We'll see if it, some of the plans on that go forward. That's a whole other conversation. But that's one example. If you have a medical issue, if something else happens, if you're only able to save a small percent of your income, I mean, forget about it. You're
Yeah,
toast at that
and
point.
our survey also asked students, we covered housing, but I'll get to that in a second. We asked students, have they considered leaving the program? And a lot of other surveys that Joe has been administering to other departments have also asked this question: have you considered leaving your program due to the financial stress of the financial situation you're put in due to these low wages? And in my department, we had 52% of the students who responded say, yes, I've considered leaving our program. And I know students who have personally left the department because they want to be financially stable,
Hmm.
which is not a selfish thing to want. I don't think wanting to be financially stable and safe is a selfish thing. And so
No.
I know students personally who have left the program and they're just like, yeah, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this for 6 years. It's not possible. Putting my life on pause and ending up in debt is not something that graduate school should be doing to you. It should set you up for the future. And that's not really possible. And kind of moving to housing is that we've asked students, okay, well, what are you paying for housing? And grad students are very, I guess this is the term I like to use. We're very scrappy. It's like we'll find any way to make things work. We'll tolerate a lot of crap and we'll tolerate a lot of things to make sure that we can stay here in our program. But that's getting more and more difficult to do. And so when we check the averages, like all the different expenses in my department, at least, it was always less than the average in Austin. So like we're finding places, dealing with places that are cheaper than like the
Hmm.
average rent in Austin. We're finding cheaper places to live. And the thing is that affordable housing for graduate students is not safe. Um, a lot of students that I know, if they can find affordable housing, in areas that aren't safe, they feel
Hmm.
unsafe. Their landlord is taking advantage of them in some way. There are holes in the walls. There's pest problems. The
Hmm.
neighbors are dangerous. It's in a dangerous area. It's not accessible or inconvenient to get to campus. There's all these issues that grad students put up with because we just can't afford to live anywhere near campus in a place that's safe.
No, that's a really good point. And it's like, oh, these people are making it work, and it's like, yeah, they're making it work, but at what cost? And that's, you outlined a good point of that. That is the cost. You're living in places that are like frankly run by like slumlord type folks who like don't actually care about their apartment complex. They care about printing as much money
Exactly.
from it as possible. If you put in a maintenance request, like good luck, you're never going to do it. So then you probably end up fixing the stuff out of your own pocket because you know that they're not going to go do it, but you can't afford to get a better apartment. You put yourself in this like kind of never ending cycle.
Yeah, you've
Um,
described exactly my experience renting in Austin. So
yeah. No, and I mean, I know you're not alone. I've been fortunate, knock on wood, so far to like luck out on the apartment complex situation, but I know a lot of people who are in situations that have not been lucky, and it's not uncommon. Um, uh, Brad, to get you into the conversation, I guess. So you also all put together this letter to the provost. For folks who are not like kind of tied into again like university academia world who are watching this, is the provost someone who has the kind of decision making ability to solve some of these problems, or is this kind of just the first person to reach out to, and kind of like how would that process kind of work, and how does this sort of look?
Yeah, so the provost is, and everyone, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this. You could think of the provost as like the CEO of the university, the kind of chief person in charge of all academic affairs. Um, and so by going straight to the provost, we're able to sort of take the issue straight to the top and try to get as powerful of a response as we can. Um, yeah.
Gotcha. And then, so with sort of this, and we'll stick with you, Brad. Is what you are all doing like? Have you gone through the process of actually like creating a union here? I know that like you're all kind of under the umbrella of underpaid at UT, correct? Am I right in assuming that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I guess and you all can. We'll leave the link to the underpaid at UT Twitter and that sort of stuff down below too, with more information on all of these folks here. But are you all looking into, or have you already kind of created an official union here, or is this more so just students organizing together more, informally, and kind of what are your plans moving forward with all of this there?
Yeah, so Texas is very different than what we're seeing a lot of in the news around grad student unionization. In Texas, there's actually a state law that says state employees, and we're all state employees if you're working at a public university, we cannot collectively bargain, we cannot strike. The only right we have is to advocate for ourselves. And so what Underpaid does is, through trying to get as much popular support and draw as much attention to the issues that we're facing as possible, we then try to advocate as much as possible to get these increases in pay or other issues like healthcare coverage gaps or the affordability crisis to be addressed by the university. And raising awareness of this issue can be very effective because UT Austin, this is the one thing we have to our advantage is UT Austin is trying to be a globally competitive university. So when our peer public institutions in the California UC system start paying way more for their grad students, it makes UT look bad. It makes it so that students who might have come here due to fit or a research area, they'll probably, if they can, want to go to UC because they can actually have a living wage, supposing that UC is successful in their efforts.
Absolutely, or just to any other university that's just like in a lower cost of living. Like you can't expect in like a very high cost of living place like Austin, where the costs are only going up, to just keep the wages the same as what they've been for seemingly a long time, and expect to remain competitive in that sort of environment.
No, and the university will tell you that they made the largest investment ever in grad students last fall, but that only bumped us up to the $20,000 a year, and it was it's been a while before that since there was that kind of investment in grad student stipends. So
Right.
UT's always playing catch up with its peer institutions. And just to add, again, because we can only advocate, this is very much a systemic issue. So what Underpaid does is we also are working together with the Texas State Employees Union, TSEU, which is associated with CWA to CWA local. Again, trying to build as much popular power as possible to push for a better university. And their issues that they're focused on are very similar to ours: pay raises, healthcare coverage for, I think, part-time workers is what they're pushing for, part-time university workers. So a lot of overlap there, and that gives us a way to kind of go under one banner with faculty, other staff at the university to try to make the institution better.
I guess what has the response been over time here from like other members of campus who might not be graduate students, whether it be other students, faculty members, professors? Like what has that sort of response been to all of this?
So it's hard to generalize in this case, right? Because a lot of the people who are turning out to our events and who we're talking to are generally supportive of Underpaid. At every action that I've been to at my time in Underpaid, there have been undergrads as well as faculty and sometimes even staff that turn out to support us. That's not to say that, of course, every member of UT faculty is supportive of undergraduates advocating for improved labor conditions. It's something that we definitely need to work on, sort of building solidarity between ourselves and faculty in order to demonstrate a stronger show of support against the university. And it's something that Underpaid is actively working towards. But I think many professors understand that we're underpaid. They understand that our wages are tied to their function in the university, to their working life, right? And so they want to see us paid more. Some of them are, mentors and friends and see like themselves in our struggle. Some can be a little bit more resistant, but we're hoping that we can put more of this focus on the ways in which that we're all connected.
Yeah, I think it's much less a matter of many faculty not supporting us. It's more, I think generally we have a lot of support. It's more, I've heard from some faculty that they feel demoralized or exhausted by, again, we can't collectively bargain, we can't strike. Those are the main tools of a union. What can we do? All we can really do is try to advocate. And in a state like Texas, I don't think there's much room to advocate at the state level for those rights back, right? That we lost these rights in the early 90s under Ann Richards, if I'm not mistaken, when she was governor. So that obviously that would be great to have those fundamental rights back as labor and a workforce. But barring that, we have the power of wanting to be a competitive institution and needing to attract people to remain one. Yeah.
Now,
But
go ahead. I'll let you finish.
No,
Okay, that's fine. So I guess as far as, so it sounds like getting the message out and getting kind of the right people on your side, as well as like the competition element of things for the university as a whole are kind of your main tools. I saw that you have now recently elected city council member Zoe Kadri. I'm probably saying his last name wrong. I apologize if he sees this.
Yeah.
Kadri. Okay.
Kadri.
Yep, and I actually ran into him at a Starbucks union vote at the 24th and Nueces Starbucks union election. I know he was out there in support of them, and he's been kind of talking about this. I guess beyond Zoe, and you can kind of talk about what he has kind of helped you all with. Have you had any success in attracting other local politicians, whether it be mayor or mayoral candidates, other city council folks, U.S. Congress folks, or anything like that? Have you had success in kind of getting any of them on your side to kind of come out and make any sort of statement on this?
I can maybe speak to this, unless you want to, Lauren. Okay, yeah. It's actually really interesting because I don't know about the history of underpaid. I've only been working with underpaid this year, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
But it was not initially our intention to reach out to elected officials.
Mm-hmm.
The grade-in was initially going to be much smaller.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know how many people who would have if the circumstances had been different. But it was going to be a group of people just grading papers in the provost office. But then, and I wasn't in this meeting, but the rest of the organizing committee met with a dean of some such or other thing in the school.
Deputy dean of students.
Yeah.
He's not exactly the dean of students, but he works in the dean of students office. Yeah.
Okay. And in not so subtle sort of euphemistic language was kind of like, okay, like this is going to be considered criminal trespassing, and there'll probably be a police presence, or we'll call UTPD, and when they get there, what they do is up to them, kind of thing. And so we shared that information, and so I think that got a lot of people a little bit more just like upset, and so then I think more people showed up than probably otherwise would have.
Mm-hmm.
And then in our scramble to sort of change the nature of the event, we reached out to a lot of people. So we had like a good cross section of people, like a tenured faculty person spoke, an adjunct faculty who's the executive director of TSEU spoke, a rank and file member of TSEU spoke, and then we also had Zoe Kadri there who spoke. And when we messaged people, we knew it was very last minute, like less than 48 hours. And so I know Vanessa Fuentes, another city council member, shared the information of the event on Twitter. I'm not sure if she did on other social media platforms or not. Celia Israel, who was a candidate who just lost, she put it on her Instagram. And then a couple others had at least responded to us via email, said to stay in touch. I don't know if some of them who said they were going to put it on social media ended up doing so.
Right.
But they were all pretty open to it. And then Zoe was already going to be there canvassing because it was the same day as election day by happenstance. And so he was there. He pointed out during his speech, for example, that he was the only city council member to have his staff unionized. And he, said, "Oh, you don't commentary about the fact that my staff unionized." They're like, "Oh, is something wrong?" And he's like, "No, they unionized, and I wanted them to unionize because it should be normal to do so."
Right.
And he's a past union member. I can't remember what union he said he was a part of, but I know he's a past union member. And so just to have that public support from the person who's about to represent the district that UT is in, we were fortunate to have that, and I'm glad that he'll be in city council now.
Great. Now, I'm just out of curiosity, anything from either Congressman-elect Greg Casar or Congressman Lloyd Doggett getting involved in this? Obviously, they're both like members of the Progressive Caucus, and you would think that they're probably, and I know both have kind of generally gotten a lot of union support. Have you tried reaching out to them and had anything there? I'm sure that them reaching out and like kind of becoming vocal on this could potentially put a lot of pressure on them.
So actually, we had another rally back in 2021 in August with TSEU and I think YDSA, some other groups on campus around COVID protocols. And Kasar came to that. So he's been involved with us in the past. I think maybe this time, since we did have to pivot due to the circumstances of our action around how the administration responded, we only gave elected officials like 48 hours heads up. So and it was on election day, so most of them had places they already were going to be. But yeah, in general, the local elected officials are very, very supportive and positive to labor. The problem is always with Austin politics. There's the tension between the state and the city.
Right. Very different. Different perspectives from both of those places for sure as well. Awesome. I guess what can folks who are not graduate students do to kind of help with all of your cause going on? I know that a lot of people watching this are probably, generally speaking, pro-labor. If folks kind of want to get involved and help in some sort of way, is there anything that they can get out and do?
I guess the simplest thing is obviously boost the message on social media. I think, obviously the focus for good reasons has been on the UC system and the new school until now, but I don't think people are highlighting that similar, albeit different actions are kind of occurring in states like Texas. And I think on that, the media has generally been really supportive from what I understand, and maybe Lauren can speak a little more about that. But there's a really great reporter here, Megan Menchaca for Austin American Statesman, who wrote the most recent article about the grade-in. And I think she writes about it in the article, but her and all press weren't allowed in during the grade-in. And so I think calling attention to it when they're clearly trying to not give it attention, that's probably the simplest thing, but maybe the others have more concrete things people can do.
So yeah, Lauren, you want to go ahead?
Oh, I was just going to say, we don't have any definite plans right now for spring actions for the spring semester, though I think we're definitely going to pursue a few options, in many of those, and we'll make it clear when we publicize it, but like members of the Austin community at large, we would always welcome support. Numbers are great for us in any kinds of these demonstrations, and it's great to talk and meet with other workers or pro-labor people in the Austin area. And maybe this is what you were going to say, Brad, but if people are Texas state employees, joining the Texas State Employees Union, which I think we're all members of, and we are always encouraging other University of Texas employees of all kinds to join the union. It's a bit tricky in Texas, and I think people have a lot of sort of either misconceptions or misgivings about joining the union, but the more people who are part of TSAU, the stronger all of our power is, even if it's without collective bargaining. And I would say too, the last thing is, and this kind of speaks to your first question, Louis, but I think people having a better awareness of what it means to be a graduate student employee, not just at University of Texas, but also, across the nation is really important. Even just this word graduate student has actually enabled the university to take a lot of different sort of tax towards us, right? We're just students, we're not workers and underpaid. We try to use the phrase graduate workers or graduate student workers as much as we can to sort of, again, rhetorically make visible our status as employee workers and not just students. It gets a little bit complicated, but just to give a quick example, we get, most of us, or I think we all do now, get a full tuition remissions as part of our stipend package, so we don't have to pay tuition on top of everything else. But this means that the university, and I've seen them do this, like to inflate what they say are compensation packages by including the money that we don't pay towards tuition to make it seem like that's part of our actual stipend, right? So if people are understanding the actual like material realities that graduate students are working in, that, in my department specifically, half of my funding package is me being an assistant instructor. That's not a TA, that's me planning, executing, teaching, doing all of the grading for all of my courses for 3 solid years of here. In many cases, I'm teaching the exact same classes that tenured university professors are teaching, right? We are, the researchers, the teachers of the university. And the more people who understand that, I think the stronger our movement can be if people understand who we are, what we're asking for, and why.
If I can just add to that really quickly, you will hear a lot of talk about us being part-time, 20-hour appointments. Again, not having to pay tuition, but I'm not taking any classes. I haven't taken any classes for a few years. I research and I teach. We don't ask faculty to pay tuition for access to the institution, right? It would be absolutely absurd. And thinking about grad student labor in terms of these 20-hour appointments is completely just missing the point, because again, we might be teaching for a 20-hour appointment, but if we're not also producing research and we're not also mentoring and we're not also engaging in service, whether that's service with university groups or service with professional organizations in our field or going to conferences, like the list is endless. And these are all things that we have to do as grad students if we want to proceed in this career. So it's very much not a part-time job, even though they will say, look, if you look at how much the grad students make with their 20-hour appointment, hourly wage, it's more than $20 an hour for most departments. It's really missing the point because it's a 60-hour, I mean, for most people, I imagine a 60-hour a week job, like very little time off.
Yeah, no, I think that those are both really good points, and like that's why I kind of wanted to start off with this too, is like you're not just there like sitting, in class having people, teach you all day. You're out there actually like taking what you've learned and like putting it into action and doing further research to kind of push all of this forward. And a lot of folks don't see that. So thank you all so much for joining.
Can I plug some TSCU events in the spring?
Yes,
so again,
definitely.
Everybody follow TSCU on social media.
Mm-hmm.
TSCU organizes around the Texas legislature. And every year in April, they have a big rally downtown at the Capitol. And if we can, we're going to try to work with them to do a march from the UT Tower down to the Capitol building. So, stay tuned and join us if you can. That's one way anybody could get involved.
And definitely send me those links because we'll include them down below. And I will also block out the dates in the calendar, and maybe we'll have Status Coup on the ground covering the event for you guys. And definitely keep us posted on any other actions, that you may take this spring. Be excited to be there. For those of you watching, getting folks like me to show up at these events, folks like Tina. Tina was showing up at the events in California with students, grad student workers organizing there. Whenever things are happening across the country, we try to be on the ground to give folks an independent take on what's actually going on. You can definitely become a member of Status Coup by heading to statuscoup.com/join. Make sure you're subscribed down below if you haven't already. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you to the four of you for taking the time to come and talk to us. I really appreciate it.
You.
And definitely be in touch. Yeah, thanks guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.